Hi there, my name is Maureen McCarthy, and I'm the current president of City Club's Board of Directors. Our mission is to inform, connect, and engage our community to strengthen the civic health of our region. We emphasize civil conversations and listening to others. For our October and November programs, we will be going back to our temporary standard format of meeting live via Zoom. Our program committee is finalizing the details regarding our topics and speakers, so please stay tuned. Before we begin, I want to say a huge thank you to our business sponsors. They are Larson Gross, Lummi Commercial Company, Danny Neal of the Mulliot Group, the Opportunity Council, Unity Care Northwest, Pacific Continental Realty, Village Books, Western Washington University, Whatcom Community College, and the Whatcom Community Foundation. And now, here's Tanya Baumgart, who will introduce today's speakers and moderate our program.
Thank you, Maureen, and welcome to the third of 3 candidate forums produced by Bellingham City Club. Today's forum features the candidates running for the Whatcom County Public Utility District Commissioner seat in District 1. The Whatcom County Public Utility District, or PUD for short, is currently a community-based water and electric utility. According to RCW number 54.04.020, a public utility district's job is to conserve the water and power resources of the state of Washington for the benefit of the people thereof, and to supply public utility service, including water and electricity for all uses. The strategic plan extending to 2025 for our PUD includes expanding the telecommunications infrastructure in Greater Whatcom County. The PUD is governed by a board of commissioners comprised of 3 local citizens elected on a nonpartisan basis by Whatcom County residents. A PUD commissioner is elected every 2 years during the general election to serve a 6-year term. Commissioners receive a salary of $21,600 annually, plus a per diem of $90 compensation for each day or portion thereof, doing PUD business, not to exceed $12,600. The 2 candidates that are with us today that are vying for the commissioner seat are Jeff McClure and Christine Grant. Jeff McClure is an architect and founding partner of RMC Architects in Bellingham. Christine Grant teaches energy policy at Western Washington University's Institute for Energy Studies. Thank you both for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Before we start, I will share the forum rules with you. For each question asked and for the closing statements, you will have 90 seconds to respond. If during the course of an answer, a candidate directly mentions their opponent, the opponent will have 30 seconds to respond. Our timers today are Susan Wright and Michelle Kopcha. Thank you both so much for helping us today. They will be operating our timer screen. When a question is being timed, the screen will turn green, just like that. When there are 15 seconds left, the screen will turn yellow. And when time is up, the screen turns red and a bell will be rung. This means stop talking. Our questions will be asked in an alternating manner so that each candidate will have the opportunity to answer a question first. We will start alphabetically and finish with the reverse order. Now that the rules are covered, we can get started. Candidates, are you ready?
Yes.
Wonderful. So our first question is, what interests you most about being or becoming a PUD commissioner, and what qualifications do you have for that position? Candidate Grant, we will start with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for hosting today. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Christine Grant, and I am a candidate for the Whatcom County Public Utility District Commission. And I felt called to run for this position because I have spent my entire career working with public and private utilities across the country. I teach energy policy up at Western and have the privilege of studying and analyzing utility policy. PUD commissioners provide the policy direction for our PUD, and I feel like my qualifications are very relevant because I am aware of what innovative utilities are doing around the country. And I want to bring that sense of innovation to our PUD. As an educator and a mother, I also am very concerned about the digital divide, and I've seen other PUDs across the state make a lot of progress on providing infrastructure and services to their communities through open access fiber networks that help bring the fastest internet in the world to their counties at a more affordable price. And I want to bring that infrastructure and those services to Whatcom County as well. I would also be the first female PUD commissioner in the 83-year history of Whatcom County. And I think that we make better policy when our elected officials represent our community.
Thank you. Candidate McCleary, your response, please.
I think the thing that interests me the most about the work that the PUD is the diversity of subjects that we get into. Our core utility is based on water and power distribution to industry and to agriculture, but we do far more than that to support the Whatcom County community. We're very involved in watershed planning. We're very involved in supporting small water utilities. And we're also involved in habitat mitigation and many of the other initiatives that we'll probably talk about a little bit further on. I think the reason that I feel well qualified for this is my professional life is as an architect. As you mentioned, I'm the founding partner of RMC Architects, a 17-member firm here in Bellingham, concentrated on commercial and public projects. And as that founding partner over my 40-year career, I have overseen the design and implementation of hundreds of millions of dollars of construction. And as a business owner, I have weathered many economic cycles. And I think this gives me the experience and the wisdom to be able to see projects through to fruition, to take large ideas and put them into implementation, to sort through the various interests of the diverse interests of many different opinions, and to be able to implement these ideas.
Thank you. The next question. COVID-19 has highlighted the need for broadband access for all Whatcom County residents. More people than ever must work from home, students' classes are online, etc. What is your plan for supplying the needed telecommunication infrastructure, and what is the timeline for this? And we're going to start with candidate McClure on that question.
You're exactly right. The COVID pandemic has shined a spotlight on many injustices in our community, and internet connectivity is one of them. Let me tell you what we as a PUD have been doing. 2 years ago, we have entered into an agreement with our partner, the Port of Bellingham, to extend fiber optic backbone throughout the county. This is a plan that's underway right now. It would be done in 3 segments. The first segment extending to the rural parts of Glacier. The second segment would include extending that fiber optic backbone northward to connect the cities in the North County. And the final segment would be southward down to Skagit County and connect to that, to the Skagit Net network. So this is something that is underway. It has been slowed somewhat by the immediate needs of creating connectivity to our school-age children in distance learning through creation of hundreds of hotspots throughout the county. But design and engineering is intended to begin in the beginning of next year. Feasibility plan has been already done, with the beginning of that middle mile backbone to be started implementation in the beginning of spring. Our role would be to provide that middle mile so that ISP internet service providers could connect to that and broaden their reach throughout the rural portions of Whatcom County. This is being done right now.
Thank you. Candidate Grant, your response?
Yes, again, as an educator, I want to point out that the digital divide was very much an issue before the pandemic. So I don't think that we can claim to have been caught off guard by the pandemic. Many of my students struggle with affording internet access, and we know that bandwidth is increasing every 12 to 18 months, which means that we are going to need faster internet connections than any of us have right now. And that is particularly true as more of us are working from home. We need to upgrade to fiber optic internet infrastructure. Fiber at a very basic level is small strands of glass and a cable that can move data at the speed of light. Most of us in Whatcom County are getting our internet through copper wires or satellite, and that technology simply is not going to be sufficient. We need great infrastructure in order to have economic growth and grow jobs and for our kids to be successful. I have a background in finance with utilities. I've helped my clients, many of them utilities, bring in $25 million of competitive funding. And I've specifically worked on bill financing and dealing with the high upfront costs of infrastructure projects. Fiber backbones are not enough. We need to do the last mile, and I have great ideas for how to finance that through local utility districts and working with community development financial institutions. We also need to be really aware of how the policy landscape is changing with this. There's going to be a lot of bills in the legislative session coming up.
Thank you. All right, our next question. The Department of Ecology predicts that spring snowpack levels across the state are decreasing. Under a moderate emissions scenario, levels will decrease 44% by the 2040s. We already have trouble sharing our water resources, and increasing temperatures are intensifying the water needs of people, fish, and farms in Whatcom County. What can the PUD do to counter this trend and help ensure an efficient and equitable use of water resources in Whatcom County for future generations? And we will start with candidate Grant, please.
Yes, so currently we know that about 70% of the water that we use in Whatcom County in the summer months is used for irrigation, and climate models are showing that as climate change intensifies, we're going to need even more water at those critical times. And so, I think that as a utility, it's really important that the PUD play a very central role in the discussions that we're having about water rights in Whatcom County right now. As a large and senior holder of water rights, that it's going to be critical to be involved in the adjudication discussions and also the possible solution of doing a negotiated rulemaking as opposed to the adjudication process that's being discussed. Utilities are all about infrastructure. They're about providing services. And so I think that it's really important that we figure out how to create more ways to get water to more users so that we can get water to the people that need them. I've had conversations with folks from the American Farmland Trust and others that are working on solutions to finance those things. So low interest loans, grants, other ways that we can provide infrastructure so we can get piping to more of our agricultural users in particular that most seriously need to get water.
Thank you. Candidate McClure, your response?
First off, anticipating the question and watching the trends with climate change has been something that has been an extreme concern for us. Last year, we completed a county-wide drought contingency plan where we provided leadership amongst all the county agencies to come together to plan for a cooperative use of water when the state declares a drought emergency has occurred. This is something that was recognized by the Department of Ecology as a model pilot project and for which we received funding from the state. So we're anticipating, that's the short-term task, is to anticipate that droughts are going to continue to occur and to be more severe. The other thing that we have conducted is a study on where water storage could occur. As was pointed out, in variable flows in August, that's the most extreme concern when the river flows are probably 20% of what they are in January, and when both fishing and farming are competing for those resources. The only way that we can really adequately ensure against those sorts of disturbances are for storage, to provide storage in areas around the county where we can release the flow into the stream to ensure adequate flow of the Nexac River. And we've conducted a study of 6 priority sites where that could occur. And we'll continue to move toward implementation of that as funding is available.
Thank you. And the next question will piggyback on that a little bit. Maybe you can elaborate. The PUD has unexercised water rights. How can the PUD exercise its unused water rights to best serve the public interest while balancing the needs of fishers, farmers, and large industry? And we'll start with candidate McClure, please.
Yes, as you point out, the PUD does enjoy a large water right. As a matter of fact, the only senior water right holder that's larger than ours is the city of Bellingham. We currently use on a daily basis less than 1/3 of our total water right, and we have been in discussions of how we might exercise the balance of that right to benefit all of Whatcom County. This is something that we've been talking with both the Nexac and the Lummi Nation on how we can be that water purveyor. One of the difficulties is, and I don't want to get too technical here, but a point of diversion usually cannot be changed. We draw water around Ferndale, and yet the need for agriculture is in the North County, and piping that water to the North County becomes a very expensive enterprise, and you can't burden farmers in irrigation water with that expense. So one of the things we have been discussing is perhaps a tri-party arrangement with the city of Bellingham, the Lummi Nation, and the PUD, got a little confused there, and the PUD to find ways where we can provide water solutions not only to the Lummi Nation, but also to farming by moving our water right around.
Thank you. And candidate Grant, your response?
I am absolutely in support of the solutions that my opponent was discussing there, and have also been in regular discussions with the general manager of the PUD, Steve Jilk, about the work that's been done on this. I've been on a 5th generation family farm just a few days ago in Linden talking about these issues, and have been in touch and am endorsed by the Nexac Indian tribe, and have talked extensively with members of the Lummi Nation about this too. So, I think that we're all in agreement that we need to get the water to the people that need it when they need it, and need to be creative about those solutions. You asked about how the PUD can leverage its large and senior water right. And, the PUD is the largest processor of water in the county, moving, anywhere between 17 and 14 millions of gallons of water per day. I have a strong energy background, and one of the places that I go to is the benefits of doing a feasibility study to determine how much electricity could be generated from installing turbines in PUD water pipes, and also the outflow pipes that PUD customers have. Turning piped water into electricity is a way to leverage existing PUD infrastructure into a potential new revenue stream, and we could generate local hydropower that doesn't harm ecosystems. So I think those are the creative, innovative ideas that I would bring to the PUD and look forward to working on.
Thank you. Next question. According to state law, a public utility district may raise revenue by the levy of an annual tax on all taxable property within the district. If funding were an issue to providing broadband access to the broader Whatcom County community, would you consider proposing a property tax increase? Why or why not? And we shall start with candidate Grant, please.
Yeah, as I've discussed before, Whatcom County families are facing economic crisis unlike anything we've ever seen before. There's challenges with food insecurity, job losses. Now is not an appropriate time to levy the PUD's property tax authority, and I would commit to not doing that. Like I said, I have a very, very strong background figuring out how to finance expensive projects, primarily clean energy projects. And the way that I've worked on those projects is working with community development financial institutions and patient capital sources that are able to provide funds for mission-driven public sector projects that do provide a return on investment over time. What's wonderful about the open access fiber networks is that you lease the fiber to internet service providers, and they pay for the infrastructure over time. And so I would really want to look into those all those options. Like I said before, the backbone is not enough. We need to get the fiber to homes and businesses. That's where so much of the value of fiber is. And looking at Kitsap PUD and Mason PUD and many others, they've used financing models that amortize the cost of that last mile infrastructure over time. Many of them are called local utility districts, and I've also spent a lot of time working on something called on-bill financing that could have a connection here.
Thank you, Candidate Grant. And Candidate McClure, your response, please.
Since I have been on the commission, we have invested millions and millions of dollars of upgrading and modernizing our facilities. And we've done all of this without spending $1 of taxpayer money. It's all been supported through rates and ratepayers, the rates that ratepayers use, and grants, as I had mentioned before. I am committed to not ever exercising our taxing authority, which we have not done in our entire history. We have access to very low interest loans that are amortized over a quite a length of time through municipal bonds. And I am convinced that the way that we're going to move forward and accomplish these sorts of initiatives that we're talking about are going to be through public-private partnerships, funded through rates, and through the grants that we are able to qualify for. And I think that this is an important thing to remember, because as my opponent pointed out, this is not the time to be burdening people with additional rates or additional taxes. And I think we can be creative in accomplishing our goals through other means.
Thank you. Next question. I almost need to rephrase it a little bit, because you referenced the port and the agreement between the port and the PUD regarding telecommunications infrastructure. That agreement has not been very active currently, is my understanding. So when you look at it, the Port of Bellingham has a goal to promote thriving economic growth to Whatcom County. The PUD has a strategic plan to provide telecommunications infrastructure. Both the port and the PUD represent the entire county. So an agreement between the two is important and could be very beneficial. If the PUD were to have a formal partnership with the Port of Bellingham to provide broadband, what would that look like, in your opinion? And we will start with candidate McClure.
If you look at similar agreements just south of us in Skagit County between the port and the PUD, that took the form of a limited liability company. That's certainly an option, but we believe that this can be done through an interlocal agreement. And the details of that are being discussed as we speak. As a matter of fact, I just had a conversation with the executive director of the port, Rob Fix, this morning. That needs, obviously, with interagency cooperation, there's a lot of detail that needs to go into that. Who provides the financial support? How is the risk shared? How is the management shared? All of those details are something that will take a little bit of time to work out, but it's actively in process. I think the important thing to understand here is the strength of two countywide agencies coming together. The port has expertise in large-scale projects. We have technical expertise as a utility in building utilities, and between the two of us, as we come together, it's very attractive for federal and state officials when they go to prioritizing funds. That's one of the things that I think that is coming out of that pandemic is the unanimity on focusing on broadband. And so we're seeing a lot of activity at funds coming down from the federal and the state levels.
Thank you. Candidate Grant, your response, please.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that, PUDs have had the authority to work on telecommunications, wholesale telecommunications, for 20 years. They got that authority in the year 2000. And our PUD attempted to provide some fiber infrastructure in the very early 2000s, and it didn't work. There were challenges with the business model. And, we took a long break from working on telecommunications. The ports in Washington State got the authority to work on telecommunications in 2016. And, our ports really moved ahead quickly on exploring broadband, and they should be applauded for that. I think we need to have really clear delineations about who's doing what. And as I've said a few times, I think one good way to do that would be to have the port focus on the backbone and have the PUD focus on the last mile fiber installations. And, the other thing that I got into briefly before, but want to mention again, is that all across the state, people are having discussions about broadband. We know that in the next legislative session, there's going to be a lot of bills focused on internet, public internet as a utility, and even the role of PUDs and the possibility that that PUDs could provide retail authority. I am the only candidate that's endorsed by State Representative Deborah Lakanoff, Representative Sharon Shoemake, Representative Alex Rammel, and State Senator Liz Lovelet. We need a PUD commissioner that can work very closely with those state representatives.
Thank you. So our next question is, should the PUD consider providing water via pipelines to farmers in areas where the pumping of groundwater from the shallow aquifer is directly reducing summer stream flow in the Nexac River? Why or why not? Candidate Grant, could you please respond to that?
Yeah, so, for a little background, there's a lot of challenges in the Nexac Basin related to water rights, particularly for farmers. And one of the key challenges that farmers are facing is uncertainty about their water rights. And that's due to a long and changing history of how water rights are acquired. But I think that our farming community is essential to our economy. It's essential to our identity as a community. And we don't want farmers to leave Whatcom County because they can't get the water that they need, or they can't get certainty about the water rights that they need. And so, again, I think that we are having a really robust community conversation right now about water rights and the role that infrastructure could play in solving some of the water rights and water quantity challenges that we have. And, many farmers are taking surface water from some of the critical fish habitat tributaries on the Nexac River. And if the PUD, in partnership with other organizations, through low interest loans, through the Bureau of Reclamation, is able to find and piece together the funding to provide piped water to farmers that could benefit not only the business of our farming community, but also habitat for salmon. So it's something that I would very much want to work on.
Thank you. Candidate McClure, please.
We have looked closely at installation of miles and miles of pipes in order to serve farmer, and it is a financial drain and very difficult to accomplish without massive outside funding that would be available. So it's a little easier to talk about distribution to farmers, and I would love to use more of our water right to support them, but to make that financially feasible is a difficult thing. One thing we are doing through our work on the Watershed Management Board is embarking on a study to map and quantify the aquifer. No one has understood exactly what sort of quantity we have in our aquifers. Now through available technology, it's easier to monitor those aquifers for well diversions. But I think this underscores an important point. If we are able to move points of diversion further upstream, which is an arduous process, then we have more of an open solution to provide affordable resources to support farming during the low flow season. One of the projects that we embarked on is an investment in cutting edge technology to support the dairy industry, Coldstream Farm and Acme, with a new innovation on how to process dairy waste. This takes dairy waste that's normally spread on fields and spread into the watershed, reprocesses it into dry fertilizer and water that then is returned to the stream.
Thank you. I think our bell isn't quite working. Question number 8. The Department of Commerce will soon announce a new criteria for their solar deployment grant program. The program is expected to focus on low-income community solar deployment, and at least $2,328,000 in funding is expected to be available to Washington communities. Do you see a role for the PUD in helping Whatcom County community solar projects qualify for this solar grant program? Candidate McClure, we'll start with you.
You know, it's an interesting idea, and we have talked about how we might be able to support our community through solar. We have taken some of our energy tax credits through the power that we do provide to communities through Bonneville Power Administration, and provided those tax credits, energy tax credits, to cities like Sumas and Blaine for energy upgrades. I would say a lot of our focus has been on larger scale attributes for community solar. We currently are in discussions with private industry at Cherry Point about assisting in the infrastructure to support large-scale community solar. That's a very early discussion at this particular point, but we think it offers a utility-grade option for those who aren't able to necessarily connect. I don't know the details of this particular grant. It sounds like something that we would be right into our sweet spot of how to manage the many grants that we do get from Washington State. And I think it would be beneficial, obviously, to the community and the PUD, and we are adding staff in next year's budget to be able to accommodate some of these special initiatives that could benefit the community.
Thank you. And Candidate Grant, your response, please.
Yeah, so my key focus as a commissioner will be on jobs, creating clean energy jobs. And, you know, a grant like this sounds appealing, but we also, right now, as the PUD has access to some of the cheapest and cleanest power in the United States. Washington State is a net exporter of power because of our hydro system that we have. And so what I would really like to focus on as it relates to clean energy is how do we take that clean energy resource that the PUD already has, and how do we create new jobs? And I think there's a number of different projects that are, you know, being considered here in the county that could create jobs. But, you know, one example that we should look into, several PUDs serve power to data centers. And data centers are, you know, increasingly sort of the epicenter of the clean energy economy. They're vastly more energy efficient than they used to be, but they still need a lot of electricity, and they create a lot of construction jobs when you build them. And so that's a kind of project that I would really want to look into so that we can get high-paying family wage jobs created right now in Whatcom County, and then certainly look into community solar projects with our partners at PSE, BP, and others. But it's all about jobs for me right now. So that's what I would want to focus on initially.
Thank you, Candidate Grant. All right, PUD activities have typically had a low profile in Whatcom County, but a number of very important responsibilities. Water, power, and broadband access are fundamental to the economic health of our county. What can you do to promote to improve the visibility and the accountability of the PUD? And Candidate Grant, we will start with you on that one.
Yeah, you know, when COVID first started, the PUD meetings switched over to Zoom, and those Zoom recordings were not being made available. And as a working mom with no childcare, I really wanted personally to have those recordings available. I talked with Steve Jilk about making those recordings available on the website, and that happened. And so I think that it's just having that perspective of how can we make information available to everyone, because having PUD meetings at 8 a.m. on Tuesdays is not always convenient. And I think that the focus of the PUD shouldn't just be so exclusively on existing customers. We need to think about who we might serve in the future. We also know that the general manager of the PUD is planning to retire soon. And in the past, the last two general managers, there hasn't been a search done. It's been one person has come forward, submitted a resume, and that person's been hired. I would like to do a robust search, and I would also like to create a committee with existing PUD customers, other key stakeholders and members of the community to be engaged in the selection process of the new general manager. I think that's a way to start building trust with the community and getting people engaged in what they want the future of our PUD to be like. I think that simple things too, like having a social media page would be a good addition. Using modern communication tools is really important for engaging the community.
Thank you, Candidate Grant. And Candidate McClure, please.
I reject the idea that the PUD has no trust with the community. I think that we're a very trusted partner within the community, and if there is one fault over the past few years is that we've spent more time doing than talking. As I mentioned, we've spent a great deal of time modernizing our facility and working in partnership with several other agencies. We are in the process of improving the visibility of the PUD. We're undergoing a branding campaign and a marketing study in order to be able to tell our story better. One of the things that I think is important for people to understand is that we are not just water resources. We are working on broadband diligently, and we're also working on other innovative ideas that we have brought to the port, like how can we use the asset at Cherry Point for more in alignment with the interests of the community. We have approached several entities within the county about the development of a clean energy park. How can we take the industries from Cherry Point and develop a concept to create the next generation of manufacturing in our community that's focused on clean energy and clean manufacturing? This is an idea that has begun to take root. Many of the elected officials throughout the county have signed on to a letter of support. And I think it's another example of the PUD in a quiet way providing leadership to the community.
Thank you. What mechanisms are available for the PUD to provide their much cleaner and less expensive electricity to other residents and businesses in the county? And we'll start with you, Candidate McClure.
As my opponent points out, we do have availability of inexpensive power through BPA. There has been discussion in the community about municipalization, where the PUD would take over the assets of Puget Sound Energy. The expense of doing that has not been analyzed. And when you layer on the cost of acquisition to the cost of available power, the actual end user rate could be quite expensive. So as we start to talk about the potential for municipalization, as my opponent has been active in discussing, we need to really consider what are the community's priorities in that. Is it local control? Is it cheaper rates? Is it accessibility to sustainable power? There's a great deal of discussion that I believe needs to occur before we establish a direction in this, because the cost of acquisition could be quite daunting. And for an organization like the PUD or any organization, that would become its sole focus for the next 10 or 20 years. I believe that there are opportunities for larger scale impacts for removing hydrocarbons from the atmosphere, like our investments potentially in hydrogen production or utility scale solar, or even investments in renewable natural gas. I'm interested in making the biggest impact.
Thank you. Candidate Grant, you were challenged a little bit in that last comment. Would you like 30 seconds to respond?
In addition to the 90 seconds that I have
And
for the question?
I will ask the question again after you get your 30 seconds. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do my 30-second response. You know, yeah, I have talked about municipalization. I volunteered for 18 months helping the city of Bellingham chart a course to 100% renewable energy future. And one of the discussions was let's look at every single possibility that we have. I think that we need to, my philosophy is invent as many options for mutual gain as possible and explore them. All I have ever said is that I think we should look into it. I think there are a tremendous number of pitfalls with municipalization.
Thank you. Okay, and now the question was, what mechanisms are available for the PUD to provide their much cleaner and less expensive electricity to other residents and businesses in the county? 90 seconds.
Yeah, so the last community in Washington state that went through a municipalization was Jefferson County PUD. And they did have quite high, their rate impacts were significant. I would never want to do anything that could increase rates for members of the community. And so the other thing that changed quite a lot between when Jefferson County did their municipalization and now is that the Clean Energy Transformation Act was passed, which is a state law that requires that all electric utilities transition to 100% clean electricity by 2045. So I think that changes the dynamic of this conversation completely. I think that I would want to be a partner to PSC and helping them transition to 100% clean electricity. And if there's something like using the PUD's existing water pipe infrastructure to generate electricity through water turbines in those pipes, let's do it. Let's look at all the creative solutions that we have. Related to the Clean Energy Transformation Act, there's been criticism of the Washington PUD Association for their role in the rulemaking process that's going on related to what it's called CETA, and that they are pushing back on some of the equity provisions that that all ratepayers benefit from this process. And so I would like to see, and as a commissioner, I would like to be a lot more involved in state policy related to how the PUD Association is trying to shape state policy, because I think equity is an incredibly important part of the clean energy transition.
Thank you, Candidate Grant. The next question is, in Whatcom County, Puget Sound Energy provides power to most households. Do you believe that there could be better accountability and more cost-effective management if the power supply were publicly managed via our public utility district? And would you support evaluating the options of doing so? Why or why not? And we'll start with Candidate Grant, please.
Yeah, I think that we should look at all the options available to us. And so if where we're at right now is on one side of the spectrum, and doing a municipalization like Jefferson County did is the other side of the spectrum, what I want to explore is what is the sweet spot in between, if there is one, or are there other ways that we can be a partner to PSE, as I just was explaining here. I think that what we all want is we want to transition to 100% clean electricity as quickly as possible. And, you know, as I've said, I've dedicated my career to climate and clean energy work. I've worked with utilities across the country, and I helped develop one of the largest green jobs programs in the region. I've worked with PSE for many years as a partner on things like promoting transportation electrification, doing an annual carbon hackathon at the university. And so I think that rather than letting the public and private distinctions divide us, I think we need to understand that we are in a race on climate change, and we need to partner together and work together and find areas of strength rather than going through years of litigation to break away from PSE. So that is my expertise. That is what I'm committed to, and I'm committed to climate action. It's incredibly important to me that we move fast on climate change.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Candidate McClure, your response.
My opponent mentioned the experience of Jefferson County that went through a municipalization, and it was an arduous process. And at the end of the day, Jefferson County pays, if not the same, perhaps a little bit higher for their energy by the time they layer on the cost of electricity plus the distribution from the acquisition of the assets. No one knows for certain what the cost of PSE assets are in Whatcom County, but they, on an initial assessment, it could be $1.5 billion. So that cost could be so burdensome that it would outweigh some of the benefits. I think what we're trying to do is get to 100% clean energy. And as my opponent pointed out, CETA requirements are going to get us to carbon neutrality by 2030 and carbon free by 2045. So we're on that path. The question is, how do we accelerate that? There are other options. A community aggregator is one, where a community comes together and decides to buy their own power, but distribute it over PSE's distribution lines. The PUD could play a role in that. It's not currently allowed under state law, but we have a great model to the south in California where a number of communities have made that choice. I do believe that private industry, we need to create all the partnerships we can, but placing pressure on private industry is a good thing. They have a tendency to respond. And so I think we might see an acceleration to clean energy by the private industry with that sort of pressure.
Thank you. I heard him reference you, but it didn't sound like it was in contradiction to you. So
I agree.
Unless you feel to rebut, I think we'll move on, if that's okay, or would you like your 30 seconds?
I'll take my 30 seconds if I can have it. Are you okay with that, Tanya?
Go ahead.
I think that what I wanted to say is that, you know, when we make procurement decisions at any level of government, we look at all the options available to us. And that's what I'm supportive of. And you know, in agreement that competition, it can be a good thing, and looking at all the options available to us is a good one. And again, what are the many different options? And policy, environmental or energy policy changes very quickly.
Thank you. I appreciate your sticking with that red screen too.
You're welcome.
Question, oh, I'm sorry, I lost track of my question categories here. All right, number 12. What do you think has been the PUD's greatest environmental accomplishment in the past decade, and what environmental goals should be set for the next decade? And we'll start with candidate McClure, please.
You know, I think our greatest environmental achievement has been the work we've been doing with the Nexac Salmon Enhancement Association. We've had a partnership with them ever since I have been on the commission in supporting them in the habitat mitigation in the Nexac Basin. I think that's been a very successful partnership, and it's been a community-wide partnership. There are so many people within the community that have a connection to the Nexac Salmon Enhancement Association. So I'm very, very proud of that. One of my goals, of course, has to do directly with climate change and how we can reduce hydrocarbons in the atmosphere. I've already talked about some of the initiatives that we have out at Cherry Point to assist companies like BPA in achieving their very laudable and aggressive goals for their energy transformation. I touched briefly on discussions that we are having with a large-scale producer of hydrogen that would be placed at Cherry Point. Hydrogen can be used as a renewable fuel. Its only byproduct is water in the atmosphere and can be used to significantly reduce hydrocarbons in the production of other fuels at Cherry Point. I think this is an area where we can have a large impact on the emissions that we have in the county.
Thank you. Candidate Grant, your thoughts on that one?
So, you know, I'm challenging an incumbent, and so I'm gonna approach this question a little bit differently and say, you know, where could we have done better with leadership on environmental issues? You know, as early as 2010, my opponent was using his role as a PUD commissioner to actively advocate for the Gateway Pacific Coal Terminal, a facility that would have resulted in the burning of 48 million tons of coal annually. And, you know, this is documented in a letter he signed supporting the coal terminal, in which he and others were lobbying former Washington Public Lands Commissioner Peter Goldmark to remove requirements that might cause a delay in making leasing and permitting decisions related to the development of the terminal. And so just to be clear here, burning 48 million tons of coal releases about as much carbon pollution as every activity in the state of Washington combined. So, you know, when we needed courageous climate leaders, elected officials like my opponent supported the dirtiest energy technologies in the world. And now climate change, as we can see, is costing our economy dearly, not to mention our health. And, you know, I just want to say that I'm the only candidate endorsed by both the Washington Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, and the Northwest Central Labor Council. So voters can trust that I will do everything I can to address climate change and create green jobs. And I've spent my entire career working on climate.
Thank you. Candidate McClure, your 30-second rebuttal.
I'm glad this subject has been exposed to the light of day because I've been hearing this from several supporters of my opponent. I wrote a letter in support of a multi-commodity terminal. When the terminal was first proposed in this community, it was proposed as one that would be used for agriculture to ship product to Asian markets. I was not the only elected official that wrote a letter of support. Several months after that, the total landscape shifted, and the developers of the port took a partnership with Peabody Coal, and many of us felt that the rug had been pulled out of it. So I in no way used my position to support a coal terminal, and I'd like the record to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. I'm thinking we're going to squeak one more question in. You guys ready for this? Your last question?
Ready.
Right on. What is your first priority as a newly elected or re-elected PUD commissioner, and how would you implement it? And we will start with you, candidate McClure.
My top priority is the extension of broadband infrastructure throughout the county. We have all, as we've talked liberally during this session, of how important that is. I'm very supportive of the plan to provide the backbone of that and work with ISP providers to provide a competitive advantage to provide the best service and the lowest rates. There are many other challenges before us, none of which will be accomplished unless we have a robust economy. I have a very deep concern about what our economic recovery will look like. I have a real desire to be an economic development leader within the county because industry is changing, as evidenced by the closure of Alco and Telco Works and the loss of 750 jobs. I think it's very important for us to find ways to replace those jobs and increase those jobs with the new generation of industry and jobs in our community. And so those would be my two top priorities as an incumbent PUD commissioner.
Thank you, candidate McClure. Candidate Grant, your response?
Yeah, so my priorities would, first, I think that there's an important transition that's happening with the leadership of the PUD with the general manager search. So I would want to make sure that we had a very strong transition plan in place and an excellent search process. And as I said before, a process to engage the community in the selection of the next general manager, as well as thinking about the roles that existing staff and new hires are playing. We need money to do a lot of the things that we're talking about. And so I think that it would be really important to hire a new staff person that has a focus in grants acquisition, in understanding different financing tools that we can use to fund that last mile of fiber that I've talked about as being so essential. I would also be very actively involved in Olympia on all of the important policies that are going to be discussed related to internet infrastructure. So I too would make countywide broadband infrastructure a top priority. And I think that Blaine and Sumas are two great places to pilot last mile fiber because they're public power communities and they own their poles and wires, which will make aerial fiber a much cheaper investment. And so I'm gonna dream big and start small, and that's stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Candidate Grant. All right.
Yeah.
And thank you, Candidate McClure, also for your time today. We are going to move on to the closing statements. And as promised, it'll be in the reverse order of your openings. So we will start a closing statement with Candidate McClure, please.
The PUD today is a vastly different organization than the one I joined, and I'm very pleased to have had a formative role in that transformation. I've overseen millions of dollars in infrastructure improvements, as I've mentioned, at the PUD and through the modernization of the entire organization. We've been a leader in water rights. We partnered with organizations in habitat mitigation, and as I mentioned, all without spending $1 in taxpayer money. In addition to overseeing these improvements, at PUD, we've embarked on many exciting new initiatives. One we've talked about in broadband development, assisting industry in the clean energy future, and continuing our leadership role in watershed planning and distribution of resources. I'm pleased to be endorsed by over 80 elected community and business leaders in our community, including U.S. Representative Rick Larson, former Whatcom County Executive Jack Lowes, and former Bellingham Mayor Kelly Linville. This is an exciting time for the community, and we're very glad to be a part of that. I would ask for your support. Please visit my website at McClure4PUD.com if you would like more information about my campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate McClure. And your closing statement, Candidate Grant.
I felt called to run for this position because I want to serve Whatcom County. I've spent my career advising utilities across the country, and this experience makes me uniquely qualified to lead our PUD. There will be no single heroes as we try to address the challenges that we spoke about today. Solutions will involve collaboration, building partnerships, listening, and a lot of really hard work. I am honored to have earned the endorsements from a range of stakeholders in our community, from Washington conservation voters to energy workers, from LIUNA Local 292 to the Washington Education Association, because our teachers and kids need countywide, fast, affordable internet. I'm endorsed by Satpal Sidhu, Sharon Shoemake, Liz Lovelet, all 7 Bellingham City Council members, and many others. 2020 has been a really hard year for all of us. When our PUD was first formed in 1937, our country was facing high unemployment and economic uncertainty. PUDs were formed all across the state that year with the hope that local communities would be better off if they had more control of their essential utilities. Today, as our lives become more dependent on the internet, as our future depends on a massive transition to clean energy, and as Pressures from climate make water resources more precarious. Our PUD has never been more relevant. 2020 has challenged all of us. It has exposed the vulnerabilities of the status quo. I ask for your vote if you are ready for a new voice on the PUD. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Grant. I'd like to thank both of you for participating in the Bellingham City Club Forum today. We appreciate your support in helping the voters of Whatcom County cast an educated vote. Today's forum was the last of 3 forums that City Club is producing for this year's local election. Our first forum was for the 42nd Legislative District, positions 1 and 2. Our second forum featured the candidates running for Whatcom County Superior Court Judge, positions 2 and 4. And then today, we conclude with the Whatcom County Public Utility District Forum. We would like to thank the City of Bellingham and BTV Bellingham for scheduling our forums on Comcast cable channels 321 HD and 10 SD, and CenturyLink channels 1040 HD and 40 SD. Online access to our forums is available on the City of Bellingham's YouTube channel. To find them, just visit youtube.com and search Bellingham City Club. Thank you, and remember to vote on November 3rd.